Welcome to Living in Chicago, the podcast where I get to interview real Chicagoans about the neighborhoods that they live, work, and play in. I'm your host. My name is Jake Lyons, and in this episode, I interview three representatives from the Greater Ravenswood Chamber of Commerce. That's going to be Amy Czarkowski, Christina Pecce, and Gene Wagendorf. That's from left to right if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it's not that. Don't worry about the order, but you'll catch on to that as you're listening. And in this episode, we talk about all the different nooks and crannies and things to know about the art scene, the restaurants, the local businesses, what it's like to live in Ravenswood from a few different perspectives. And it's just a really fun conversation and very educational. Definitely, if you have any interest whatsoever in the Ravenswood neighborhood of Chicago, and if you're wondering what the boundaries of that are, we get into that quite a bit because that's kind of a whole topic unto itself. There's a lot of different neighborhoods that kind of bleed into Ravenswood, so it's a little difficult to even define what exactly Ravenswood is. But I think they do as good of a job as possible. But yeah, so this is a great conversation that we had. And just a quick note, it's going to sound a little bit different than especially how you hear my voice right now because this was recorded in person. This is the first time I've done an episode in person. Usually I do it over Zoom or some other thing like that. So if it sounds a little different, that's why I say that in the beginning as well. But wanted to give you, I guess, a double heads up on that. Sometimes my voice is a little bit hard to hear, but at least I believe you can hear them pretty well. So, if it had to go one way or the other, at least you can hear them and their responses because they are all fantastic. So, without further ado, I'm not going to step on any more toes of the conversation. Let's go ahead and get into my conversation with the Greater Ravenswood Chamber of Commerce. All right. Joined here today. This is a special episode. This is the first episode of Living in Chicago in a couple different ways. This is the first episode that I've done more than one guest at a time, and the first episode that we've done it in person. So everything sounds a little different. It's because it is different. So joined here today by Christina Pecce, Amy Czarkowski, and Gene Wagendorf III, all of the Greater Ravenswood Chamber of Commerce. And I'm just going to go ahead and give them a quick opportunity to tell them a little bit about themselves and what they do respectively for the G or the what's it, RGCC as the acronym would be. Right?
GRD.
No. See? That's what we're going to get with the in-person stuff.
Cool. I'll go first.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Jake, for having us on today. Thrilled to be able to talk about what we do here with you. My name's Christina Pecce, as you mentioned. Originally from Boston, came over to Chicago in 2017, plopped a sublet apartment right across the street from Winamac Park, and I have not left Ravenswood since. I am new to the chamber. I have been the business services manager here since the beginning of May. So I'm very happy to have Amy and Gene here, helping fill in any gaps that I may have. But let me pass it over to Amy.
Yeah, so I am Amy Czarkowski. I live here in Ravenswood, and I am our business and program, or sorry, your business services. I'm events and programs manager. And I take care of all of the public facing events that we do here at the chamber. So I am usually a blur running up and down the street. So if you just see something, you think that you may have just seen someone out of the corner of your eye, usually me running up and down, checking on people, making sure everything's operating properly at our events that we do.
Okay.
My name's Gene. I'm the associate director here at the chamber. I've been working at the GRCC for coming up on 10 years this June. I'm a Humboldt Park resident. And I was born in Chicago on the Northwest Side. So I lived Jefferson Park, Portage Park as a kid, and then moved to Belmont Cragen, and then eventually bought a home in Humboldt Park. So I stopped the southward vision there.
Had to put a stop to that at some point. Okay, awesome. So what is the area that the GRCC encompasses? Because we're pretty close to a couple of different, it's not. The Lincoln Square has their own thing, right? And then, we're close to Uptown, we're close to Edgemont, we're close to all these other things. So what would you say is kind of like the parameters of, what you represent?
I can feel that one. So we focus on Ravenswood and its surrounding communities, which include some of the ones you touched on, Lincoln Square, North Center, a sliver of Uptown, and a little bit of Bowmanville. Our boundaries for the chamber roughly go from the river to Clark Street and from Irving Park up to Balmoral. So it's a large area. You mentioned there's some great other local organizations that do work in some of those sections. So we focus the majority of what we do on the area between Damon and Clark and Irving Park and Foster, roughly.
Okay. What would you say are the sort of the unique characteristics of the business needs in that area?
It's challenging because it's such a diverse mix of industries here. There's not really one business type that defines the neighborhood. We've got this glorious industrial corridor where our office is situated that you're visiting today that has traditional old school manufacturers, brewers, office spaces, tech startups, nonprofit offices. But then if you go out to Wilson or Lawrence or Damon, you're going to find more traditional retail corridors that are, like a lot of the others across the city, struggling to recover from the pandemic, but full of entrepreneurs who had ideas and career changes over those couple of years too. So it's an exciting time, even though it's a challenging one.
Sure. What kind of resources do you find that the businesses that did struggle from the pandemic, was probably in some way or another, all of them? What do you find that, or how about this? What characteristics would you say the ones that have made it through had?
Creativity.
Okay.
And a willingness to collaborate. You know, the pandemic forced people like our neighbors at Cobalt Distillery to shift from producing spirits to producing hand sanitizer. And that's not something that, you know, they were even legally allowed to do at the onset of the pandemic, let alone is built into their business model. Another good example would be the Long Room, which is a bar and tavern up at Ashland and Ravenswood, or Irving Park, pardon me. They developed a bottling line so that they could do cocktails in-house that they would bottle for to-go sales. That was something that, even after business opened back up, wound up being something that was a new revenue stream for the business and something that kept them front and center for people during those couple of years where we couldn't go out much. So really creativity and a willingness to move away from what you've been doing for a couple of years, even if it was temporary.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did, during the pandemic, I definitely did buy a lot of hand sanitizer that was made by, you know, distilleries and things like that. And we had some that, you know, kind of had like a gin smell or like a tequila smell, but like in a good way.
Yeah.
You know?
It made it convenient to one shopping during the pandemic because I definitely needed whiskey and I definitely needed a hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
I get them both from the same drive up
There
to
you
the
go.
spot.
Yeah. You know exactly where to go. Yeah, I see you wearing the Malt Row hat. How long has that branding been a thing? Because it's such a dope name. I love it. And it makes sense too.
That was about 2015, 2016.
Okay.
We had just had the first Ravenswood on Tap craft beer festival at the time up at Foster and Ravenswood in front of what used to be Empirical Brewery. And we were looking for, aside from the Ravenswood Art Walk that happens in the fall, things to showcase about the neighborhood in an outdoor summer festival setting. And we looked around and saw, I think at the time, 4 or 5 breweries in close proximity and another on the way, plus Cobalt Distillery. And so that was, I think, the first conversations about Malt Row came from planning that first festival. And then, you know, the conversation about what to do after the festival. And that's where it really took off.
Nice. What was the launch of that branding like? Like, how do you go from just the ideation of like, oh, what would be cool is if we just started calling this Malt Row to, you know, like actually putting it out there and making it a thing?
A lot of beer and hiring a competent graphic designer. I think we spent a lot of time meeting at the different breweries to talk about the strengths of the neighborhood, what differentiated the breweries from each other and how they liked to collaborate. Malt was the one ingredient that we found that everybody was using, including Cobalt Distillery. So there were a lot of hop-related puns that were suggested at the time, but malt really felt right for being able to include Cobalt. And then I mentioned hiring a competent graphic designer. We worked with Jenny from Orc Posters, who also runs Neighborly right over in Lincoln Square. She does some incredible work, including our Malt Row logo and some of the branding elements that we use. And then from there, you know, to make anything official, you have to have some city buy-in. So we invited reps from the city of Chicago to come down to Cobalt and have a press conference where we announced Malt Row is the branding initiative for the neighborhood. And really, once we did that, we started hearing requests for group tours of Malt Row or ways that people could do events or have tastings or hop on a trolley that would move people between breweries. And so now the biggest struggle has been trying to keep up with the amount of things people want to do to connect with all of the breweries. We've been lucky that as we've lost a couple over the years, we continue to have more opening up in the neighborhood. So we just celebrated the ribbon cutting for Demo Brewery right across the street here at Ravenswood Art Walk. And that is first new brewery we've had in since the pandemic. So it's very exciting to see them finally get their doors open.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure all the distilleries and breweries and restaurants like that probably lend themselves to having some pretty gnarly events.
Oh yeah. We obviously we celebrate all different kinds of businesses that we have, but obviously people of a certain age, they love having a drink. And so we have quite a few different options as far as getting included in malt related events that we do. We just recently restarted one of our event series called the Happy Hours. It was something that we were doing remotely during the pandemic, where we would get a few different breweries and Gene, and they would have people get select beers from various breweries, collect them, and then they could drink them at home and have a guided tasting. So it's funny because I used to work at Empirical Brewery, so I was representing Empirical during one of the happy hours that we did. And now I am planning the happy hours from the chamber side. So I kind of know both ends of it in that aspect. We recently had our first one at Spiteful. It was highlighting lagers versus ales and the brewing difference between the two of them. We had about 25 people show up for it, and they did an absolutely amazing job of giving the science behind it in a very digestible way.
And where, sir?
At Spiteful Brewing,
Okay.
Up in Bowmanville. And that went absolutely fantastically. We have our next one coming up at Dovetail on May 15th. That one is going to be highlighting beer service traditions because they're very European beer focused. So they'll have different glass options that you can drink your beer from. And they'll be talking about the camaraderie and the environment that's around drinking beer. And then we have a few more down the pipeline. We obviously have Ravenswood on Tap, our gigantic festival that we do outside. And then we also have in the end of June, Monroe on Damon coming up, where various breweries open up in Damon Avenue businesses between Argyle and Wilson. And you get a little glass with a koozie lanyard that you can wear around your neck, and you can get 5-ounce samples of all the beers, slightly less for alcohol, hard alcohol, obviously. We don't necessarily need people walking around with 5 ounces of whiskey as much as we would love it.
Giving some thimbles.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great way to not only highlight the Monroe members that we have, but also get them involved with Damon businesses and highlight how many amazing boutiques and stores that we have on Damon Avenue.
Yeah, Damon Avenue is a really cool place to be. We should probably just take a quick step back. And we've talked in general terms of definitely the events that you guys can grow and support in other general ways. But how would you define exactly what a Chamber of Commerce does and the role that it plays for the local business community?
So we're a nonprofit organization that works to support local businesses, which is pretty broad. We help them with navigating city government, acquiring permits and licenses, developing community events, marketing, hiring and HR issues, getting access to city resources, pretty much anything that a small business owner is going to run into. We're a resource for them or can connect them with another city resource.
Okay.
Our organization has been around since 2015. We also have a sister nonprofit called the Ravenswood Community Council that's been around since the 60s. They've historically been focused on resident issues like community safety, greening initiatives. More recently, their focus has been on greening and sustainability projects, advocating for affordable housing, and supporting public art.
Okay. So it's a nonprofit that, and I'm sure you work closely in conjunction with the local government, like you said. So I'm sure you have to have constantly good communication with like the alderman, alderperson, things like that.
Yeah.
And the classic Chicago phrase of like, oh, I got a guy. It's like you kind of are the guy the quote unquote guy here that you can go to get stuff done.
And if we're not, we should be equipped to refer you to the person who is your guy.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I have a random question. So you say you live across from Winnemac Park, right?
I did, yes.
You did, okay.
Yes.
Do you happen to know, because every summer when it gets to be around 4th of July time, there's always the rumor that, oh, they're actually going to shut down the fireworks this year. This year's the last, you can't go there. They're going to be there to shut it down. And then inevitably it happens anyway. You know, this past year, did it still happen? Is it still going on? Because for anybody who's listening or watching who doesn't know, Winnemac Park for 4th of July goes hard for the fireworks. Like there's all these baseball diamonds out there, and the families will just gather from all over the place. And I mean, it's like a professional grade fireworks show that goes on there. But with the whole significantly less safe. Like, you're definitely taking your life into your own hands a little bit. Like, you're gonna get some shrapnel coming your way. There's gonna be a rocket goes astray, bottle rocket or something. I mean, something's gonna happen every time you go. But that's like a little bit of the fun in it, too. But I don't know, is it more popular than, or is it actually what's this? I don't know. This speak on it.
Yes. So this year there is a community-led organization, and Amy or Gene can help me with the name. I believe it's Winnemac 4th for All.
That's the name of the event.
That's the name of the event on 4th of July. What I do know is they're going to have the folks from Full Moon Jam come out, which is a group that does this amazing drum circle celebration at every full moon at Foster Beach in the past. So they're coming out for the 4th, and they're a really cool performance-based group. I don't believe there's some sort of dancer or acrobat situation, but baton. I feel like I've seen fire, maybe fire eating. I don't want to speak more than what I'm fully aware of, but I know that Full Moon Jam will be out for the 4th.
Yeah, they will for sure have fire dancing. They just emphasized that there won't be fireworks this year.
Okay. And this is where this is at the beach. You said, or
This will be at Winnemac Park.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a group that normally works or puts on these events out at the lakefront. They're working with the Winnemac Park Advisory Council to host that as the finale of a day-long celebration in the park. But I think we'll also include some outdoor yoga and a community kickball contest. I think they're trying to get a softball tournament going as well. So it seems like the approach from neighbors is to try to do something different this year.
Yeah.
To your question about whether there's ever been a truly successful stopping of the event, not that I've seen yet in the 10 years I've been working in the neighborhood. And I know that event has been going on in an unofficial capacity for a couple of decades now. Last year was the closest I think we got. I know Alderman Vasquez up that way was working with the park and Amundsen School to try to close some of the ball fields and reduce the amount of people that were at the event to hopefully increase safety. As you mentioned, some of the very real shrapnel that goes flying around there. But TBD, we're very curious, I think, to see how it goes this year and to see what type of event the neighbors put on and how their neighbors respond to it.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, from a resident and just somebody looking for something cool, I love it. But I could also see that if you're in a position of somebody who's actually trying to look out for the well-being of their citizens, why they would probably want to try to let's pivot here and try to do something a little different.
That's a smart distinction. I think my answer would also be very different if I was a resident versus if I was in charge of keeping the residents safe.
This is for anyone or all of you. Maybe just take a turn. Who would you say the neighborhood of Ravenswood is ideal for? Like, why do you think somebody would want to live in Ravenswood over any of the other 100 some odd neighborhoods in Chicago?
I can take that first.
Yeah.
I think the neighborhood is ideal for makers, artists, small business owners, and folks who love enjoying all of those things. There's a really cool community of, as I said, different creatives in this neighborhood because there are so many educational outlets and places where they can display their work, as well as great places to eat and hang. That's what I think. That's a great group of people that this neighborhood is ideal for. But I'll let Amy and Gene chime in too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Christina said. And from a resident's perspective, as someone who works and lives in Ravenswood, even if you aren't a owner or an active professional artist, or you're not selling your art, just being within this community can really get your creative juices flowing because you're seeing so much fantastic craft going on. You see the public art that we have, and it's just really exciting to be able to get more ideas if you're a hobbyist, or if, it's the classic thing, like what you do for work versus what you do to live versus survive. So if you are a living artist, even if you're not a professional one, it's still a really fantastic place to be able to make connections and just expose yourself to some ideas that you may not have already gotten yourself.
Sure.
It's also a great neighborhood for people that enjoy being active and either don't own a car or don't use a car as their primary mode of transportation. We've got a lot of bike infrastructure, greenways, protected bike lanes, more of those coming to the neighborhood, an abundance of public transit options, some buses that run with pretty regular hours in service, a couple of train lines, the metro stations here, Divvy stations all over the place. And then because of that small business makeup, you really can find most of what you need within 15 minutes of your home if you're in the neighborhood. So it's just incredibly walkable. I'd say if you're somebody who prioritizes that, we've got that here.
Time for the Real Estate Stats Corner, presented by me, Jake Lyons, real estate advisor here in the Chicago area with At Properties and my website, thechicagohomesource.com. In this segment, I am going to share 3 statistics about the Ravenswood area that I believe will give you at least a pretty good idea of what's going on in the real estate market and what people are willing to pay to live in this neighborhood. I think that this is relevant because, after all, what is a neighborhood without real estate, right? So, the 3 stats I am going to share are the median sales price of 2-bed condos in the Ravenswood area, the median sales price of houses with at least 3 bedrooms, which pretty much every house will have more than 3 bedrooms for the most part in these areas anyway, and the median rent price for 2-bed apartments in this area. So the first statistic is the median sales price for 2-bed condos, which, as of the most recent data that I have access to right now, which is March of 2024. So keep that in mind whenever you are watching or listening to this episode. That is probably different now. But in any case, March of 2024, the median sales price for 2-bed condos in the Ravenswood neighborhood is $322,500. 50% sold for more, 50% sold for less. That is the median sales price for 2-bed condos in the Ravenswood area of Chicago. For houses, the median sales price is $998,000. Almost $1 million. Almost made it. Just a little hair under $1 million is the median sales price for a house in the Ravenswood neighborhood. Do keep in mind that's a pretty small sample size because houses in this neighborhood there are houses, they just don't come up for sale very often. I think as I'm looking at this, it's only been 9 that have sold in the last year, so that affects this number a little bit with a kind of a smaller sample size. And for a 2-bed apartment in the Ravenswood neighborhood, expect to pay a median of basically $2,100, $2,095. And so there you have it. There is the Real Estate Stats Corner for Ravenswood. If you want to see what all is on the market right now, you can go to thechicagohomesource.com, and that is good for not just this neighborhood, but every neighborhood in the greater Chicago area. And the URL for that will be posted in the show notes. Yeah, the public transit is a good call out because, I mean, especially the metro, there really aren't that many places in the city that are anywhere near as convenient to the metro specifically.
Yeah,
To this day, I've never been on the metro.
Oh, I love the metro.
I've never heard a bad thing about the metro. Everybody loves it.
You can drink on the metro.
You
Yeah.
can. You can. No, the metro's great, and then they're having the Ravenswood station, right in the heart of the neighborhood, is so convenient. If you want to go downtown, it's two stops to Ogilvy, and I've clocked it before. Sometimes it takes as quick as 8 minutes
Wow.
to get right in the center.
Good downtown from here?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you can also take that line the opposite direction and head over to Ravinia over the summer. So it's super convenient and fast. I love the metro. I love taking it.
That's good to know. Yeah. Yeah, I talk about Ravenswood Avenue a lot because, the metro line goes straight down the middle of Ravenswood Avenue. So Ravenswood Avenue itself, it doesn't even feel like a real street. For part of it, it kind of just feels like a parking lot or like an alley or something. But it's just because there's a train line going right through the middle of it. But
Well, part of
Yeah.
our programming to kind of segue about the Ravenswood corridor, and I'll let Amy follow on this, but 2 of our biggest events happen right on the Ravenswood corridor.
Right.
And Amy, you want to talk about some of our cool programming?
I'd love to. So we've obviously already talked about Ravenswood on Tap. That is our craft beer and music festival that we do, highlighting Malt Bro. We have all of them up and down Ravenswood between Berteau and Belle Plaine on the east side of the tracks. I think that's one of the big things with Ravenswood that makes it kind of interesting to give people directions, because you have to be like, okay, east versus west side, and then also then what corner southeast or whatever you're specifically talking about. So it can be a little bit interesting to give people specific directions on where you're supposed to go on Ravenswood Avenue. But
it was not in a bad way. I mean,
Yeah.
it started, but in case like what I said earlier about that seemed like the negative, like it's not just a train line going through the middle of the street. It's actually it's really pretty, like because it's like tree lined, and the metro coming through is quiet, relatively quiet. I think like versus the CTA, the metro is crazy quiet.
Well, you'll get them both right here.
Yeah. I've heard it a couple times, but you barely notice it. And this is one of the kind of unique charms of being in a big city is trains coming through. And I don't know, speaking of myself, I love trains growing up, so I just I had like the little toy train sets and all that kind of stuff.
It's funny that you went with parking lot at first, because that very much was the vibe on Ravenswood for a long time. One of the you poke around along the metro embankment, you'll still see the occasional no dumping sign. Those are all rusted out and were put in the 60s or 70s and 80s when it was really common for people to just do fly dumping in the neighborhood. So it was not unusual to see piles of garbage or old furniture or piles of tires or things like that. And that was pre a lot of the landscaping that you noticed, and a lot of that tree canopy was put in by design to try to discourage people from seeing more of an industrial area and just piling onto the mess.
So yeah, Ravenswood on Tap this year is going to be on July 20th and 21st. We have a lot of amazing bands coming, amazing food vendors, and it's a whole weekend of just celebrating Ravenswood, not only the Marlborough breweries and distilleries, which obviously are a huge part of it, but also local businesses who are able to pop up and sell their food, or artists who are able to be retail vendors there. We try and keep it as local as possible. And then we also do the Ravenswood Art Walk this year. It's September 14th and 15th. And that we have an outdoor artist market on Ravenswood, same east side between Bertel and Belle Plaine. Typically about 60 plus artists are on the street. And then additionally, we open up along Ravenswood between Irving Park and Lawrence, various studios and manufacturers and galleries who sign up to be on our map. And they will open their doors and either give tours or just let people look around a little bit, do demos, and just engage the Ravenswood community and also whatever people come into Ravenswood for it, and show them the amazing, thriving network of artists and manufacturers that are on Ravenswood Avenue that make this such an amazing, creative place to be.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife was in that show.
She was,
last fall, and had a great turnout. It was a really good, really fun weekend. We were across the way from this group that was building. They were teaching children who came by how to build.
Bit space.
Yeah. What's the right point? Is it?
There's a segue.
There's a segue here.
Okay.
Yeah, we were just before you came into the office today, checking in with the people who helped us with that project. So every year at Art Walk, this local youth makers lab, Bit Space, comes out and leads that building project you saw. So they're teaching kids on the street how to use power tools. They're letting them kind of free design this structure. They call it an exquisite fort. But over the 2 days of the festival, kids can just drop in, learn how to build it, paint it, design it, and then play on it for the rest of the weekend.
It was really cool.
It's really fun, yeah.
Especially because we were literally right across from it. So we were just seeing it, being built every step of the way. And I mean, the kids were eating it up, man. They loved it. And it was just like, this is such a good idea.
So one of the things they did last year that was a little different was, aside from the fort, Bit Space also led the kids in building and designing panels that would be put together into a little free library that we just had a community vote to decide where to install. And so for Children's Book Week in May, we'll be kicking the week off with installing a little free library of Wilson and Ravenswood in one of the existing people spaces that we've got in the neighborhood that's already kids focused. There's some colorful sidewalk painting and some tiered stone slab seating for kids to climb on. And in just about a month, we'll have an adorable little free library that kids from the neighborhood and the festival designed that'll be stocked with age-appropriate books.
And they'll be there again this year?
Yes, they'll be there again this year, and hopefully every year we're involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for just having something there for parents with their kids, just to keep them occupied for a little while, and that seems to really do the trick. From just a resident standpoint here, what would you say? I mean, we talked about a lot of the things that people would care about, like the transit and getting around and just the general vibes. What would you say? Just a lot of people when they're looking for a place to live, obviously safety is going to come up. And, Chicago, if you're coming in from out of town, you're probably seeing the headlines and all that kind of stuff, right? So what would you say, just what speaks to just your experience or what you hear from residents as to the safety level and just what it's like to live here in general?
I can speak on that. We are in a city, so there are things that happen that maybe wouldn't happen as often in the suburbs where things can be a little bit quieter. What I will say about particularly safety in Ravenswood is that the community is so fast and ready to come together on anything that happens. And that I think really makes this neighborhood unique. From also a parent standpoint, what drew me to Ravenswood wasn't necessarily to start a family here, but I just so happened to. I've really seen that in action as we, go out in playgrounds or just, hear about things happening. Like the community is really, really quick to be able to communicate to one another with ongoings and come to solutions together.
Mhm.
I can speak on the chamber side of it too. I know you're asking more residential, but we've had a kind of an exciting collaboration come into play with our organization. There is a newly formed within the last year in the 19th Police District. It's called the 19th Police District Council, which is an elected body. There are 3 folks that serve on that committee. And right now they're serving as a kind of liaison between business leaders, community leaders, residents, and CPD. And their goal right now is to get input from business leaders and community members to try to create some short-term actionable goals to present to the police department and the 19th district. So we're in the works of that right now, and I'm excited to see where that heads. But I will say on both the business and the residential end, you have a lot of people who really care about one another here in this neighborhood. And that sense of community is really important. And I'm grateful for that.
All right. Yeah, that works for me. How would you say the neighborhood has changed over the years?
How far back do you want to go?
Let's go. I mean, as far back as you can.
So, the biggest ongoing conflict in the neighborhood probably hasn't changed in over 100 years.
Oh.
My guess is that 100 years ago, there were people who lived adjacent to this industrial corridor who were unhappy with the noise or the smells or the traffic that was coming from the people who were manufacturing here.
Mhm.
And I probably have 2 complaints in my inbox related to those issues just in the time that we've been talking. We have this very vibrant manufacturing corridor in Ravenswood that is unique on the north side, and then it has a lot of spaces that are specifically zoned for manufacturing. And so makers of all kinds come here, especially if they're looking for space on the north side, which is increasingly dwindling. And we have very wealthy residential communities that in some instances share an alley with this industrial corridor. So that can be a really natural conflict and a really natural opportunity for some community building. But it's not uncommon to see a fist shaking neighbor at a community event upset that they feel like they're being pushed out, and they've lived here for over 50 years and they're feeling pushed out by an economy that predates them by another 50. So as the city continues to try to examine what it wants to do with its manufacturing corridors, especially on the north side, this neighborhood has the potential to significantly change from what it has been. There's a lot of development pressure on this part of the city right now, and not a lot of economic incentive to manufacture here. And that's historically what people have done. So we're in the process of trying to get the city to engage with us again, because the last plan this area had for development was in 2019. So that's a pandemic and 2 mayoral administrations ago. There's a lot that has changed since then in the neighborhood and downtown. And so I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be really informative for what the neighborhood looks like in the next 20 to 30. I mentioned this being a manufacturing corridor. Over the last 30 years, you probably had a demographic flip of 70% of people in the neighborhood were blue collar workers, migrant heavy community that lived here and worked here. And we've almost entirely flipped that across 30, 35 years, where it is 70% white collar workers who are either working downtown or working from home, 30% minority employees who are typically more blue collar. We're still working at some of these manufacturers in the neighborhood, but living elsewhere now.
Interesting, yeah. What would be your prediction on where things go? What's the pressure coming in? Like what do people want?
I think there's increasing demand for affordable housing, especially in this part of the city, and increasing density and increasing the amount of residents that we can fit in is one way that local government is looking at lowering the cost of living here. We have this great transit network that we've talked about already. A lot of that is close to this area that could be developed out. So I think what I expect to see is the city changing its rather strict guidelines on development to allow for more mixed use development in the neighborhood, where we may see first floor commercial uses, hopefully still first floor uses for people who are interested in making things here, but then second and third floor residential. I think that it probably balance the realities of the cost of doing business in this part of the city right now with what the neighborhood also needs in terms of space for people to live.
You know, this was one of the ADU pilot areas.
Yes,
It was.
yes.
Okay.
So we've got some architects in the chamber that have had some pretty creative designs for ADUs. I know our predominant alder, we work with the 46th, 47th, and 40th wards. Alderman Martin was a huge proponent of that ADU ordinance a couple of years ago, or that pilot a couple of years ago. I couldn't speak to how many there are in the neighborhood,
Right.
but I'd love to get some of those numbers too.
Yes.
So that program is thriving or not over its first couple of years.
I would too. As a real estate agent, I mean, and I work a lot in the small multifamily space. That's one of my specialties that I like to work in. And I mean, I tell people about it, but you know, I don't know how much appetite there is to sort of open that can of worms to the city to have people come, you know, snoop around when everybody's doing it anyway. You know, people are already having their garden units and their attic units and whatever, and just, you know, just kind of going under the radar. Not that that's good or bad or that I recommend that or any of that, but you know, everybody knows it's thousands and thousands of those units in the city right now. But you know, if people kind of open that can and say, all right, let's legitimize this, it could, you know, I think the fear is that, okay, well, now people can come in and, you know, there's going to be citations. There could be all kinds of code violations that I didn't even know I was doing. And now why did I do this, you know? So I applaud the effort, but it's also just, I don't know, the city also doesn't make it super welcoming in other ways too, you know, so.
And the other piece of that is the cost of, you know, from scratch building a coach house, which I think is oftentimes what people envision when they think of an ADU. It's still prohibitive in the city. So if we're really looking at that as an avenue for increasing affordability, it might be worth as a city exploring whether we can incentivize the construction of new ADUs or maybe incentivize the repair and upkeep or bringing up to code of existing ADUs that hadn't been licensed.
Yeah. I almost feel like there should be, you know how they have the rule in place where it's like if you're at a party and there's underage drinking and somebody's like needs to go to the hospital, if you call 911, that you have immunity. Nobody there is going to get like a ticket. I almost feel like it should be like that. Like, look, I'm trying to do right. I'm trying to get this ADU, or I'm trying to build this under all the right guidelines and everything. Just can we just focus on this part? And if I have a deck that needs to be replaced, just tell me about it. Don't write me up. You know, whatever. Yeah.
We can dream.
Yeah. Anyway, that was fun. Thanks for indulging me on that. Christina, as the person here who is not originally from Chicago, how do you compare what just living in Chicago versus living in Boston?
I'll say, first of all, if you've ever looked at a map of the street grids in Boston, you will be so happy to be in Chicago. It's all, you know.
Grateful for the fire.
Grateful
for the Chicago fire.
yes.
We were able to actually build a grid. Otherwise, we probably would look like Boston.
You
It
very-
would just all be around the
It
river.
could have went down that way. Yeah, no, Boston streets are very famous for its confusing routes and hills, and I don't mind hills. I think they're, you know, they serve a purpose, but I do like the landscape of Chicago, and it's very easy to know where you are in proximity if you have, you know, the number of a block, etc. That I love about Chicago. But I also spent a lot of time in New York, and New York and Boston are comparable. They are both extremely expensive to live in. I think Boston recently has just almost surpassed New York with rent and real estate pricing.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is very expensive, which is too bad too, because it's such a large population of students.
Right.
And they just keep getting pushed further and further out of the city, making it, their commutes harder. But it's quite, in my experience and background, it's pretty unaffordable, unfortunately. So that is one of the main reasons why I love Chicago. It is still, a major city that is relatively affordable in comparison to other major cities in the country. Also, what I love so much about coming from, artsy cities like Boston and New York is that you still get that vibrant art performing scene here in the city. And it almost feels more collaborative. And that's something that I've always really appreciated about Chicago in particular, that I think makes the city stands out to other art hubs, is that there's a sense of, okay, we're all artists here. We all have our mediums. Let's see what creative things we can do together. And I personally am a huge fan of that. And that's why I think Chicago is the greatest city.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're just comparing cost of living and sort of, versus all the other sort of major premier American cities, Chicago is the best bang for the buck. And I don't really think it's that close. Yeah.
Mhm.
And, if you're comparing like your LAs and San Fran, especially San Fran, and, Seattle, like New York, Boston, apparently. I didn't know Boston was that expensive.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty crazy to me. What's a common misconception that people have about Ravenswood?
I bet it's Lincoln Square.
Okay.
You touched on boundaries a little bit earlier. That's always one of our favorite topics to bat back and forth, because they're ultimately pretty meaningless for how people interact with their neighborhoods. But yeah, I think because we are not a community area and the city uses the community area designation for its planning, Ravenswood is spread across parts of the Lakeview, Uptown, North Center, and Lincoln Square community areas.
Yeah,
So yes, you might be in Lincoln Square, but you might be in a part of it that really feels more like Ravenswood. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, I think, is the feel of the neighborhood and where people who live in it on a regular basis define that they are. Those things, I mean, you're in real estate, they can all shift, they can all be manipulated. Neighborhoods can go in and out of style for a variety of reasons. But I think that's one of the things that as a community we've struggled with in the past, less so these days, but it still kind of came up as kind of clearly my first response to that question. As a chamber, we very much want people to know or to feel like they're in Ravenswood when they're here. And I think that depending on what part of the neighborhood you're in, that can get a little confusing.
Yeah, because doesn't the Lincoln Square Chamber also, isn't it like Lincoln Square / Ravenswood Chamber?
Yes. So then there is also a North Center Chamber of Commerce. Right. So depending on the ribbon cutting, you might see all three of us there supporting a new business, which is, I think, a good problem to have. It may be a little confusing from time to time for people to understand the amount of resources available to them. I can tell you I have lived in neighborhoods where I deeply wish there were 3 chambers of commerce tripping over themselves to try to support my business corridors. And so I think that's one of the educational things for me after spending 10 years in Ravenswood or Lincoln Square or North Center or Bowmanville, is that I would like to see this overlap of resources in Belmont, Reagan, and Humboldt Park.
Do you guys compete for memberships when there's kind of overlapping areas like that, or is that not really?
We just have big fights. We come snapping in one direction down Lawrence Avenue, and they come snapping down the other. Last man standing gets the member. No, we work pretty collaboratively with the other chambers. I'm pretty guilty of encouraging people to check out all of the organizations that work in the neighborhood. We all do so much that's so different. And to get into the nitty gritty, many of us manage special service areas, which is an economic development tool the city has to redirect some property tax revenue away from the grand budget downtown, keep it locally. A commission of local property owners and business owners decide how to spend that. It's where you see a lot of support for neighborhood litter abatement, graffiti removal, landscaping, advertising, special events, snow removal, a variety of services. Those have hard geographic boundaries, and chambers typically manage those services. So if you're wondering why at Lawrence and Levitt, suddenly your banners changed from the street from saying Lincoln Square to saying Ravenswood, odds are it's because that's where there's an SSA boundary, and those are really geographically specific services. So there's some overlap between what we do, and then there's also some pretty clear distinction. So you're never going to see us doing a Ravenswood Arts Festival right down Lincoln Avenue and Giddings Plaza in the same way that the North Center Chamber probably isn't going to decide to move Rib Fest over to Foster Avenue.
Businesses can also be members of multiple chambers at once. So depending on what our chamber offers versus what another chamber might offer, they can certainly be a part of multiple chambers just to get the word out even more about their business.
Mhm. That makes sense, especially if it's a business that is actually in different areas,
Mhm.
different locations and things. Of course, you're going to be involved with all kinds of different.
In some cases, too, it's a matter of knowing where your customers are. So we work with businesses in Ravenswood that are also members of the Chamber of Commerce in Andersonville or Uptown, just because that increases their reach for marketing. They're going to benefit from participating in events over there because people are coming to get their dogs groomed. Again, neighbors typically aren't so concerned with where the geographic boundaries of their neighborhood is. And I don't think when people are looking for their dog groomer, they go, well, I can't cross Foster because then I'd be leaving Andersonville to go into Ravenswood and supporting a non-Andersonville business. So it really works pretty symbiotically, and especially with similar communities with forward-thinking leadership around us, it's really easy to find places to collaborate.
We got two more questions here, and then we can do like what did I forget to ask that you wanted to talk about, kind of thing. We can probably get a good response from each of you here. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about Ravenswood since either living here / working here?
Well, I can take that first. Certainly, the most surprising thing that I learned recently was just how big the puzzling community is here in Ravenswood. Yeah, there's a lot of people who love puzzles. We recently, at the end of February, we hosted a first ever Ravenswood puzzle swap over at Falcon's Handcrafted Sandwiches. That's over at Lawrence and Damon. And we, set up a singular 6-foot table with some puzzles on top of it. We were like, we'll probably get a good crop of people coming out here to bring a couple of puzzles, exchange for a couple of puzzles. We had a representative from Chicago Public Library's Sulcer branch who was signing people up for library cards if anyone wanted to come for that. And Falcons was also offering a special on dine-in and to-go orders in case anyone wanted to grab some food while they were there. We were not fully anticipating, I think it was 112, 115 people that we actively counted were coming through with just tote bags full to bursting with puzzles, ready to talk to neighbors who also love puzzles, ready to talk about the benefits of like 1,000 versus 500 and painting versus a photograph. And it was a really exciting thing to see and a very big surprise to us. So we actually ended up polling those people who came to that event, asked them how often they would like to see puzzle swaps in Ravenswood. And I am currently talking with Platform 47 over on Damon, a relatively new place at Damon and Leland. They are probably going to host our next one in the spring. So it's very exciting to see a different network of people who we may not have touched previously that now we can get more involved with, see what they need, see what they could use from us to support them throughout the year.
That is surprising, but also I can see it. It kind of makes sense when you think about a community of people who are makers and problem solvers and creative types that like to sit down and really like do hard things like that.
Yeah,
it makes sense. It makes sense to me in a way. That's cool.
I have one that's probably a little bit less obvious. Coming from Boston, there was one particular day that was called Alston Christmas. So Alston Brighton is this neighborhood just west of Boston where a lot of students live, a lot of young folks. I equate it to like the hip neighborhoods of Wicker Park or Logan Square. It's a fun spot, but on move out and move in day for the students, maybe September 1st, I think it is. That's what they deemed Alston Christmas, where any items or pieces of furniture that they're not taking with them to the next spot or they didn't have room for is just out in the front yards and people are snatching what they can. When I came to Chicago, Ravenswood in particular, the Ravenswood Free Box group came to my attention. And I had no idea that, you could have such an organized group on social media helping neighborhoods reduce waste, give away things that they don't need, help your neighbors. It has been like the most incredible resource. And a little shout out to them. That group is affiliated with the Ravenswood Neighbors Association, who every year they do a free cycle event. So I believe that this year it will be on June 8th. It's a Saturday where, outside of what they organize through their Facebook group, they invite anyone who wants to participate to have a section out in their yard of free stuff just for people to come by and take.
Mhm.
And I, for one, have gotten a lot of great finds from not only that event, but just from the group in general. I know that a lot of neighborhoods have groups like these, but I wasn't introduced to it until I got to Ravenswood. And I will say it is a very organized group and I really appreciate them. So I guess that's my surprising thing for
Mhm.
my own self. Maybe not surprising to everyone, but it was to me.
I remember being surprised when I first learned about those too. Yeah, we've definitely, so a lot of our furniture has come from there. I mean, it's a great resource.
I've been surprised at how many private members only clubs exist in Ravenswood. That's not something that I've had much experience with. Growing up on the northwest side of the city, I always heard rumors about key clubs. But Ravenswood is the first place I've been where there are a handful of known private members only clubs that you can join and gain access to a space in a community. There's a somewhat public, well-known one on Damon Avenue that works on some community events. One of the few that I can speak of that doesn't operate in any legal gray area is the Ravenswood Golf Club, which is a legitimate private members only club that's tucked into a building that from the outside looks like it would just be a storage space. And you get up to their second floor after, saying the password at the door, and they've got, I think it's 10 virtual bays set up so that you can golf courses from all over the world. And there's a bar and a pool table and a poker table and big screen TVs to watch the game. And just this incredible space that doesn't feel like it's in a warehouse building in the industrial corridor.
Mhm.
There's a handful of surprising spaces like that, art galleries and studios that convert to events from time to time.
Yeah.
We always throw that stuff in our newsletter when it gets sent our way. So if you're trying to figure out how you even find out about things like that, we do a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for at ravenswoodchicago.org. And it's got upcoming events that are happening in the neighborhood. And we'll slip a couple of those in from time
Oh,
to
that's
time.
cool. Yeah, little. Everybody loves something like that.
Yeah.
Being on the in crowd, little speakeasy kind of things like that. That's great. And we'll definitely have all the relevant links to things in the show notes and all that. That's awesome. I think I lied a little bit. I still have two more questions because I think I forgot one. That's gonna be good. This one you might have to. I got all of you on that last one, right?
Yeah.
This one you might have to ruffle a couple feathers on this one. You might have to pick some favorites of local businesses on this one, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll see how you navigate it. What would you say, or how would you recommend that somebody who is visiting Ravenswood spend a perfect day? What's a perfect Ravenswood day?
I guess I can take it first. Once again, I would say, obviously, being the events person,
Mhm.
coming during Art Walk is a pretty great experience. Starting off your day on Malt Row, grabbing some beers, head over to any of the numerous amazing restaurants that we have that have patios. Cultivate by Forbidden Root is a brew pub that's up at Ravenswood and Lawrence. They have amazing food and beer, or you could grab a beer at any of the Marlboro breweries. You could go down to the Long Room, which has a fantastic menu and has 3 various food pop-ups throughout the week. They have chefs that have certain guest spots that they all rotate. So there's Bad Johnny's and they do pizza. There's AJ's Bakery and Diner, and she does amazing comfort food. And then there's Nice Guy Food Co., amazing burgers. So really anywhere that you go, you're going to get a fantastic meal, and then come maybe during Art Walk weekend and then walk up and down Ravenswood Avenue and pop your head into all those little speakeasy galleries and studios that we've been talking about all over the place. I just really experience what Ravenswood is like. I think that's not only an experience that people will come to Ravenswood for, but that's also an experience that Ravenswood residents love doing. So you're getting the resident experience. There are any number of people who will do exactly that any given weekend.
Okay. Good luck topping that.
All right. I would take you on a boutique artsy crawl. Maybe we'd go down Montrose. We'd hit up Hazel. We'd cross the street, go over to Gigi's General Store, which is plastic free, and grab some fun dry goods. Maybe if you're on a Friday, grab some fresh eggs from a farmer's pop-up. Then I'd take you down Damon Ave. I got a soft spot over there. We'd go hang out at District and go see some cool repurposed vintage furniture and some cool housewares. We go to Ponapaz, which is my personal favorite store in the entire neighborhood. I'm biased though, I used to work there. I check out the work of Adrienne Hawthorne and be immersed with colorful vibrance, and maybe there's a pop-up there with another local maker that I haven't heard about, and I can check out some either new jewelry or some cool felted works. I'd continue down, maybe I'd grab a coffee at Groundswell right next door, go down to Bonfen and Molasses, two other amazing boutiques right down the way, and I'd end over at Winnemac Park. I'd grab my hammock and we'd hang there and have a nice picnic lunch.
There you go.
And that's it. All that just like a lunch? That was That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, these are incredibly ambitious days.
Like we said, it's walkable.
It is.
Yeah, get anywhere you want.
Is it instantly transportable?
Yeah, it's teleportable.
If you want.
Yeah.
All right. So following those lines, I think what I'll emphasize is I would pick an outdoor space in the neighborhood and then find activities to do nearby. At one end of the neighborhood, we've got Graceland Cemetery, which is incredible for its historic architecture, its markers of significant graves. It's also an arboretum, which most people don't know. And it is a hell of a visit 365 days a year. Well, I don't know if they're open on the holidays, but any season, I suppose, is what I mean.
Mhm.
And that's an easy spot just down the street from the Long Room, where we mentioned, which has a gorgeous back patio and some restaurants. You can grab a drink, coffee, lunch, dinner. If I was hanging out near Winnemac Park, I'd want to spend time in the nature area over there, or maybe playing pickleball or tennis, whichever you're not upset that people use the courts for.
Mhm.
And then, you can't beat walking down Damon, get some, provisions for a picnic from Salsa's Market. If I was interested in a day focused on the arts, I think I'd start with the Ravenswood Sculpture Garden, which is a collection of public art along the Metro embankments. So Ravenswood Avenue between Irving Park and Lawrence. There's, I think, about 12 sculptures, a handful of murals, some guerrilla sculptures and installations that get dropped in from time to time. And that path will take you close to Romo Gusano or Farm Bar, where you can have a killer meal out on a patio, and you'll be walking right by Will Street Art Center. So if you want to actually get your hands dirty and create, you can pop in there for a ceramics class or throw on the pottery wheel.
Y'all came ready for this one.
I mean, that's literally our job.
Yeah.
If we fumbled that question, we should have had too many answers for that one.
Yeah, we can go on round two.
Yeah. We'll play your Monday, your Tuesday, your
Exactly.
And then my last official question for each of you: what is one story or memory that encapsulates your experience here, the Ravenswood experience?
Do you want to go reverse order, or you want to start?
Yeah, Christina, why don't you start?
I got one. I do have a music background, so I will say encapsulating. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. What is one story or memory that encapsulates your experience at Ravenswood?
One story or memory. I will say definitely I've spent some incredible weekends over at the Thirsty Ears Festival held by Access Contemporary Music. It's just a great time, again, coming from a background of music.
Right, you're an opera country singer. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So
Incredible.
trained in opera, taken some roads along the way that has led me to be in a country western band, where sometimes I will pop out a little operatic ditty.
Wow.
Yeah, but that festival is incredible. I think this year it'll be September 7th and 8th. Really all ages. It's great to see folks coming out for that event.
Mine's event related as well. My sort of outstanding memory from the neighborhood over the last 10 years is the first Ravenswood Art Walk that I worked on. I was here as a part-time employee, just helping out with that festival at the time, and I had no idea what I was doing. There wasn't great record keeping that particular year. And so to get myself acquainted with the neighborhood and the people that might be interested in the festival, I started at Ravenswood and Grace, so just a little bit north of Addison. Started with that big block-long industrial building there and hit the buzzers until somebody let me in. And then I just knocked on every door, which in that building is got to be upwards of 50 or 60 businesses in there, just introducing myself, trying to understand what people were doing, if they were making something, what they were making. Are you open to the public? Can we get you into Art Walk? And then I did that from roughly Grace all the way to Lawrence Avenue on both sides of the tracks. And that is how I formed most of the relationships that I still have in the neighborhood. And it really hit me over the course of that exercise, just how special this community was, because all I'd seen, when I came in for my job interview, the first couple of days was just these big hulking buildings that I assumed that were filled, I assumed, with a lot of dirty machines and people making noise. And then once I got in them, it was just this incredibly connected community of artisans of all backgrounds. And when I think of Ravenswood, that's what I think of it as, which is I think why Art Walk sticks out to me, because it's the one time we get to try to convince most of them to open up for the weekend and let people in.
Yeah, beautiful.
I got two quick things. If in interest of time, if you need to nix one of them, by all means. But in my personal life, last weekend, my husband and I decided on Saturday morning that we were hungry and we wanted to go out for a bite to eat. And we found ourselves down at the Long Room. Nice guys. Food Co. was doing their thing. And so we got some breakfast sandwiches and we were just sitting down with some tea and a couple of drinks. And it was just a lovely afternoon watching all the people come through, all of the amazing clientele that are here in Ravenswood. There was someone who was taking pictures on a Polaroid camera and we offered to help them. They were trying to, do a selfie with it. And we were like, well, we can help you with that. So if you don't have the viewfinder flipped. And then afterwards, he offered to take our picture. And so we have just a cute little picture of my husband and I eating lunch, brunch, however you want to phrase it. I think that's just such a quintessential Ravenswood thing. It's just community, really nice people all together having a great time. My work-related memory is from my first actual art walk. So I started with the Chamber at the beginning of 2021, and Art Walk 2022 was particularly memorable because that is the weekend that Ravenswood got flooded. I don't know if you remember that, but all of the underpasses for the Metro on Ravenswood, I was up to my knees and thighs wading through water. We had type 3 barricades. Things were just floating off. We were trying, and we had the outdoor artist market both of those days. Sunday, we ended up canceling it, and we were doing our best to clean up, tell all the artists that they could come and collect their things, trying to redirect traffic because no one could get underneath the viaducts. And it was a whole big thing. And that might sound like a bad memory, but there's a lot of good that came out of it because I saw all the people who were still out with their umbrellas going to all the indoor studios and still trying to enjoy Art Walk and enjoying Art Walk actively in the best way that they could, which was, even though they can't be outside for very long, they could at least pop into all of the indoor places that were still open. People who I knew were, very sweet and like running down the sidewalk to put an umbrella over my head when I had already been out in the rain for 2 hours and I was soaked to the bone. I was like, I really appreciate the sentiment, but it's not necessarily helping. But yeah, just that camaraderie and that love of supporting local artists was still very real and very active, even though people's basements were flooding, people couldn't drive anywhere. They were having to wade through water up to their shins. It was a whole big thing, but it was really sweet to see everyone still out and about, actively participating in what we have going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Underpasses in Chicago during rainstorms, not just Ravenswood, but just everywhere.
Yeah.
Just in general, not great. But
there's a photo book to be made out there of flooded underpasses.
Yeah.
Make a nice coffee table rust.
Was there any questions that I have? Is there anything that you were hoping that I would ask that you came like, man, I want to talk about this? I'd be asked something about this.
I feel like we covered the big parts. Anything that jumps out at you?
If not,
Not that I can think of. Yeah, I feel like we got into some pretty juicy details and things going on.
Yeah, great. So what would I say? What's the best way that somebody can get a hold of you?
So we have our website is ravenswoodchicago.org. That's where you can find information about the history of Ravenswood, our events calendar, our business directory of the businesses who are within our network, photos of some of the public art that we've helped instigate the installation of, and all sorts of fun stuff you can find on our website. We also have our social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, if that's your thing. And the three of us. Oh, yeah.
People around there.
And the three of us are in and out of the office throughout the week. If you ever feel like you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to chat and we're here to help and we're here to talk up Ravenswood.
And I just encourage you to sign up for that newsletter. I know nobody necessarily needs an extra email in their inbox every week. We promise to send you just the one, and it is packed with information about things to do in the city, news in the neighborhood. And I think it might be the most valuable thing we do. So if you go to our website, it should be the first thing that pops up is an invite to join that mailing list.
Fantastic. And yeah, again, I'll have the links to all that in the show notes and everywhere else that I post this. And I think that does it. Amy, Christina, Gene, thank you so much for your time. And I hope this will prove to be valuable.
Thank you for having
you.
us.
Yeah.